Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Have a great day.
Hi, everybody. My name's Greg. I'm alcoholic. And that's good news. I know what's wrong. I can't tell you how touched I've been this weekend, how much love I felt, and how many of you have come up and introduced yourself and started up a conversation. And that really does mean a lot to me and my wife. As you travel around, and it doesn't matter how long you're sober, when you're in a new group of people, there's always those moments of feeling a little out of sorts. And they were short-lived here. Believe me, they really were. And there's a tremendous amount of love in this room this morning, and I can feel it. My home group is the Language of the Heart group in Half Moon Bay, California. It is a great group, and it's a really crazy group. And I'll give you one example of it. It's a men's meeting. And so when we formed the meeting, we said, gee, we want to be an AA group, but if we're a men's meeting, that may exclude some people. And so we had this long, arduous debate to make sure that we complied with the third tradition, being open to anybody. And we came up to the conclusion, well, we're a men's meeting, and we really read from Language of the Heart, but anybody's welcome at our group. So if you're ever in that part of the world, and it's Tuesday night, you're welcome at my home group. My sobriety date is Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1978. And I found sobriety on the island of Maui. And what's really amazing to me is prior to that, I was a drinker that could not drink. And I'll get into a little bit more of that as I go on. But I went to that meeting, and I haven't had a drink since. And I didn't go to that meeting to get sober. I went there to get a wife back. I was living in my car. I was destitute. I lost everything. And lo and behold, I haven't had a drink. So if you're new to AA, the good news is that you don't ever have to drink again starting right now today if you don't want to. Because the fact of the matter is there's a room full of people here that will go to hell and back again with you to help you not drink today. And bottom line, that's the deal in AA. We're a non-drinking fellowship of men and women who will go anywhere and do anything to help each other to remain that way in this 24 hours. So I really want to echo what Mary said about the candy in the room, and oh my God, the silver spoon. I was going to bring it out here. It's a big serving spoon, and I'm sure everyone got one. And it's etched in native carvings, and it's got, if you look closely, it's got a little AA down in the middle of it, and it's just a precious gift. And in my household, the door's always open. Whoever walks through the door sits at the table, and we eat and drink coffee. And so that's going to be part of our daily rituals, to have that big serving spoon on our table. And I really appreciate your thoughtfulness as a committee to do that. Archie, I know lots of accolades have been there. This is a program of deflation of ego. But I know how much it meant to everyone here in Vancouver that this roundup be rejuvenated, and I think you and your committee has done a super job. And Mary, she excellent hostess. Arrived at the airport, talking on her cell phone, directing everybody coming out of internet. Walked right by her, she didn't even see me. So I'm standing around there looking and kind of, giving my AA smile. And finally I go over and sort her out, and there she was. And then she introduced me to Boyd. And Boyd, thank you so much for looking after us. You really did a great job. Where are you, Boyd? Good. Thank you. Thank you. One of the things there are several things that really touched my heart this weekend, and I'm not going to go through the whole litany of it because that's all we talk about is my gratitude list today. But I do want to speak about Friday night. And Liz, who gave it up for us Friday night, she's a dear friend of mine, and I've known her for quite a few years, been in service with her, and I was manager of the office when she was appointed committee on the board, and it was so, she really participated well, really gave her heart out into the projects that the Trustees Literature Committee was preparing for the conference. And one of the things that happened, though, on that Friday night, and it's never happened to me, as you had this wonderful countdown, there were 11 people with one day. I've never seen that before. 11 people with one day. And there was this lady sitting in front of me, and I could tell she was brand new. I mean, she had a whiff of flavor. It's kind of distinct. And she was quite emotional, and I could see as she figured out what was going on, she was going to get up here on this stage, and oh my God. And she did, and she got her big book, and she came and sat back down, and the proceedings started. And I watched over her shoulder as she cracked open that book, and she read a couple of sentences, and then she just very gingerly rubbed her hand on the pages, just kind of caressed it. And oh my God, she's totally unaware of what she was doing for me, but that's exactly how I felt about that book. I mean, that's where I had my first spiritual experience, and I didn't come from that world at all. And I had a hard time reading that book. And so, 11 people, I prayed to God. Oh my God, I thought about it all weekend. I just prayed to God, there's 11 people in this room with 3 days of sobriety. 3 days of God's gift for alcoholics that can't drink. But I want to speak to those 11 people for a moment. Because, you did that for me. My very first meeting I went to, like I said, I wasn't coming here to get sober and have a transforming experience in life. I was coming here to get back in the house, get the wife back, find some money. It was just, I was a wreck. I was a goner. I was at the point where I wanted to pull my trigger on the gun that I didn't have. But I was in that moment that we all have to get to. And it's so amazing. And what visionaries our founders were. They knew that I was going to have to get to that place where I would say the hardest thing that everybody has to say is, please help me, I can't stop drinking. AA works 100% of the time, but that's one of those prerequisites. In order for AA to work for me, I had to reach out and say to another man, please help me. I can't stop drinking. And thank God I did that morning of February 14th. It changed my life forever and ever and ever. And it has, as my drinking had such a negative ripple effect in my family, in my community, in my surroundings, my sobriety has this positive, wonderful, loving, energetic effect. One of the founding principles in AA is anonymity. And we have a tradition that speaks to anonymity, and it's 100% anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. I don't declare my membership nor show my face as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, for me, I also know that new people have to be afforded as much anonymity so that they can feel comfortable being with us. And we honor them and always give them that. But for me, after I've been sober a while, I now want to shout from the treetops. I am not an anonymous person, believe me, because this is such a great message. It is absolutely something that moves mountains. I mean, And I know I'm speaking to the choir. And I'm no different than you. And that's the thing that's so powerful about anonymity. It's our common malady and our common solution. Everything else doesn't matter. Everything doesn't matter. Doesn't care what kind of car you drove up in, where you live, who your significant other is. It's this illness that you have, that I have, and our ability to relate at depth with that illness and to celebrate a common path, walking a path of sobriety and sharing that message. So if you're new, I really want to explain to you, you got that book last night. And that's one of those great tools. When I went to that very first meeting after I surrendered that man, it was a step study group in Maui, Hawaii, and they had a newcomer, and so they stopped what they were doing, and they talked about step one, and everybody spoke to my heart. They absolutely pierced that steely armor with their words. They just pierced it. And I remember at the end of the meeting, I was asked if I wanted to say something, and I said, my name is Greg, and I'm alcoholic. Now, as I shared yesterday in that service meeting, I was just mimicking what they were doing. I didn't know what alcoholism was. I didn't know any of that. And I surely wasn't a member of AA. I was a visitor. I was a newcomer. But just again, for me, it was an admission that I needed help. By me saying I was alcoholic, I was crying out for help. And that group surrounded me, and they nurtured me, and they cared me. But they did two things for me that I know is why I stand here today before you sober. A sober man that's on a path of enlightenment. They made sure I had that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and they didn't let me leave that room without a sponsor. They didn't let me leave that room without a sponsor. Can't underscore how important that is if you're new to AA. And if you're sitting in this audience this morning and you don't have a book, I'll get you one. If you don't have a sponsor, you got to get one. It's the same thing. You ask for help with your drinking. You ask for help with learning how to live life free from alcohol. But that's the promises that AA gives me, is that they're going to teach me how to live life free, happily and joyously free from alcohol. And that's the good news. That is absolutely the good news. So if you want to change your life 180 degrees and start enjoying the realm of the Spirit, I really encourage you to do those two things today. The other thing that struck me was during that service meeting, and the topic really was, I think Jamie expressed it, that what shape is your triangle in? And I'd mentioned something like that, and I shared a few minutes. And it's still resonating with me because I thought about it, and I did some searching in the last day or two, and I think my triangle's in pretty good shape. I think my recovery, I think I'm recovered and continuing to enjoy an ever unfolding life. I absolutely celebrate and know how intricately those principles and the traditions are to my group's recovery and the ability for it to do 12-step work. And the concepts for world service, it's how we carry this beautiful message outside of our groups and outside of our families to the world abounding, and how well we are walking big book for our community. So I think it's pretty good. And I do believe that the three legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous is the program. And it took our founders 28 years to finish memorializing it in writing. And all of those principles, all of the things that are interwoven within those concepts and traditions and principles are all related principles that enable AA to continue to fulfill its mission, which was read this morning, to ensure that AA is here for future generations. I want to talk a little bit more about a home group and what it's meant to me. It's really the base of everything in AA. I know lots of people that come to AA, me included, knowing nothing about how dynamic a home group was going to be in my life. But it has really gotten to the place where it has been everything that I've ever yearned for in life. It's a place where that I can go and I can walk in the room, sit down in a chair, and take a deep breath, and for 1 hour or an hour and a half, I turn my head off. It gets quiet. It goes away. Because for that hour, I'm thinking about you. And that's really my experience in working through these legacies. All of them are about taking away this inward reflection that I am sick with. Francine talked about it this morning. It's so great. And it's about an outward reflection. I've always had the steps in my life. I just finished another 5th step, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But I want to tell you what the end result of my applying those principles in my life, what I've come to. And it's very simplistic. I believe, for me, that the design of life, the very essence of life for every human on the planet, every single human, is to be in love and to give service. It's that simple. It makes so much sense to me in my way of life that that's what we're supposed to do, whether we're in AA or not. I drank alcohol for the effect produced by alcohol. Oh my God, it gave me the personality change I craved. I didn't want to be me. I guess some people call them ANDA or other subject. I'm a druggie. I'm from the 60s, I had long hair, and it got me out of me. I ate it or smoked it or did whatever it was to it. But that didn't put me where I wanted to be. Alcohol turned on my light switch. Drugs just put me in the corner vegetating. Yeah, they physically strung me out, but they didn't give me that nirvana I was looking for. AA gives me a very similar effect. When I'm looking outward towards you, oh my God, I can't tell you the effect. That hole in my stomach is gone. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity, that feeling of self-centered fear, the feeling that it is all about me, absolutely is gone. And it's the place that I try to be in more times than not. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little later. But I do want to tell you about that I am a drunk. And I loved what booze did for me in the beginning. It absolutely created a world that was magical to me. Here in this last 5th step, so I'm sober 33 years, and I have been doing the steps over and over and over for all these years. And I've tried to extract those principles, look at them in different ways, and apply them to my life. And it was just in this last 12 months I've discovered some tidbits about me that are so meaningful, that have been buried way deep down inside me. And I'm still not through processing them. And that was that the effects of my being a 12 or 13-year-old when I started drinking, and the effects of having a family break up during that time, and, stiff upper lip, and didn't affect me at all. And, oh God, it was tragic in my life. And I'm just starting to get in touch with those feelings. And it was during the time that I was abused by an uncle. And actually, I'm looking at it now. My God, I prostituted myself with him. He'd buy me booze, and I'd allow him to use my body. And, I'd stuffed all that down inside me because it was so painful. And so what I'm trying to really relate to is this unfolding of gray continues. And it's all about me being able to look down inside and search. Know that everything that's happened in my life is going to touch somebody else. It's going to have a positive effect on somebody else. The first time I drank alcohol, I was off on a little summer vacation with Mom. They were divorced and we were going somewhere and I didn't want to go and I was going to make her life miserable, and so I pouted the whole time and just caused havoc. And we went and visited some relatives somewhere, and I got caught up with some older boys under the house, and they were having a drinking party. And they were taking beer. They were drinking beer, and they were putting it in shot glasses, and you had to have a shot glass of beer every minute. And if you ever tried that experiment, you can get a buzz pretty quickly. And so as that started warming up inside of me, and those walls started melting, it wasn't too long that I was bonded with these boys. Oh my God, they were my long lost brethren. I was laughing with them. Oh God, it was so great. I'd never felt that, because before I was always so lonely and so frightened. I was scared to death of people. I didn't know how to handle emotions. My God, when a woman would cry or a man would cry or there'd be a fight or there'd be any kind of show of outbreak of emotion, I would turn tail and run. It was just too real for me, too frightening. And here I found the magic elixir. And the fact of the matter is, the reason I drank from there until I was 31 years old, I wanted to relive that feeling of release. That's the only reason I drank. To go to that feeling was so powerful in my life. And from that day forward, I drank as much as I could. And I already had started acting out. I had a very bad time staying out of jail. I mean, I was in jail when I was 13 and 14 and 15, and all of it surrounded alcohol or bad behavior. I started doing things that I was ashamed of. I started blacking out. I mean, every time I would come to in the morning, whether I did something wrong or not, I had this immense feeling of shame. Even days that it was great, I had this immense feeling of shame, like I didn't belong on planet Earth. Somehow, my wires were broken. They didn't connect. My feel-good wires, anything about me that the view of me was always in a negative light. So alcohol worked great for me. I born and raised in L.A., and I got into so much trouble that I found myself one more time before the Superior Court of Los Angeles, and they figured that I was going to do some serious jail time this time. But Mom had a good lawyer, and we figured out a deal where I would be barred from living in L.A. County. And so they shipped me off to San Diego to live with her. And my address really was south of the border some in Tijuana. And I started that same kind of pattern. Drinking and using people and getting in lots of trouble. I happened to be at the racetrack one day. I was 17 years old and put $2 on a nag and won $75 and jumped on a plane and went to Hawaii. And ended up on Maui, and it was so much, oh God, talk about a spiritual experience. It was 1967. I arrived in Lahaina, Maui, and they were reenacting the whaling spree. Now, that used to be the capital of Hawaii, and there would be, in the day, there would be lots of these square riggers anchored out front, and the sailors would be getting all grogged up, and there'd be naked Hawaiian women on the beach, and there would be a huge party, and they were reenacting that, and they had put roadblocks on both ends of town to keep cars out. No cars allowed, and it was a 4-day drunk when I arrived. I never left. It was great. I changed islands now and then, but 32 years later, I was still in Hawaii. And that's where the worst part of my drinking happened. That's where I got into the type of drinking that becomes very dark, very extremely dark. And a terrible thing happened. I married a gal, and we had a son, and I didn't belong in a marriage. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I knew nothing. I had none of those skills. You know, I stopped growing when I was 12, so I never matured. And then, you know, I'm one of those people that, God, I kept crashing cars and breaking things. And I came to one morning in a cane field in the floorboard of my car, and I'd been involved in a head-on accident. The other guy had died. And I remember the tragedy surrounding that. And I'm off to the hospital and learning about the death. And, oh, my God, it broke my heart to take somebody's life with my car in a blackout. And I remember, once again, swearing off that I will never, ever drink again. This is it. This is absolutely it. And I meant it. Way down in here, I meant it. But I'm alcoholic, unbeknownst to me, and I'm drunk within 24 hours. And I continued to drink around the clock for the next 7 years. And it got very dark. And thank God that family left me. Thank God they moved away from me. And eventually I found myself in that car on the beach wanting to commit suicide. Well, so I got to that place where I was willing to ask for help. And things were it was amazing, that surrender. I got a book, and I got a sponsor, and I got directions. And the directions were, you start on this page here, and you read all the way over to this page at the back, and then you fold it back, and you start reading again. And I'll tell you when to stop. So I had very firm instructions. Now, I wasn't able to read much or comprehend very little, but my first sober experience was when I read that part of the book that talked about alcoholism being an allergy. And so here I'm hearing these words, and I'm seeing, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm not a bad person. I have an illness. And you know, when they wrote the book, they hadn't figured out it was a disease yet. It was just an illness. And I had an illness. I had an allergic reaction when I put booze inside me. I developed this phenomena of craving that I couldn't stop, and it just went on. And to boot, I was absolutely insane. It was that moment of insanity leading up to rationalizing, well, this time it'll be different. This time I won't end up in jail. This time I'll be able to stop. This time, I mean, that was the insanity. That was where that step 2 really came home for me. Is that it's always that insane moment prior to that first drink that got me in trouble. And I could not pick up that drink. I just couldn't. And so then here I end up with this group of people, and all of a sudden, day 2, I'm not drinking. So what's different? I'm with people that want to learn how to live life without drinking, and we help each other. It was just monumental, so simplistic, but so monumental. That's why when people come and go and they have sobriety and they leave, and it's always the same story when I ask, well, I stopped going to meetings. I got disconnected. I stopped working the steps. I stopped doing these things that are healthy for me. And so I listen very well when I hear those things. I listen very well. And the reason that I've been able to do it is because it's only in a 24-hour segment. I only got to do what's asked of me today. Just today. I was very fortunate getting sober in Maui at the time, and they were going through a big metamorphosis of their service structure. They were like here in Vancouver, you have an intergroup that does a lot of services and a helpline, and they distribute literature and they do all that stuff. in Hawaii at the time, they didn't have any general service conference structure. They just always were very happy with an intergroup. And one of the delegates came home from a conference and said, gee, we ought to start a general service conference structure here in Hawaii. And so I was, very new in sobriety, and I got involved in that. And I tell you, I learned so many lessons how people would make sacrifices. I mean, that's really the underpinning principle behind all of our traditions, right? The humility behind making sacrifices for the good of the whole. And so these vested interests in intergroup that they had had for many years, they slowly passed them off to this upstart general service structure. And it was really done with lots of love and lots of dedication. And so I was part of that. And I think that adds a lot to the why I grew up with 3 legacies in my life. I just didn't get sober and got some magical point and said, oh, now I'll start looking at the tradition. And then I did that for a while, and then I'll start looking at world service and concepts. I was taught all of that. I was taught the program of AA, and encompasses all of that, and it's all right now. My third meeting of AA, I went on a 12-step call. I had a lot to give. I knew how not to drink for 3 days. That's a powerful message for someone that's trying to get one day. So my growing up in Hawaii was very, very moving. And I got extremely involved in AA service. As Mary said, I became a delegate in the 80s and a trustee in the 90s, and then a general manager of your general service office in the decade of 2000. And those experiences of serving the fellowship were, but I'll talk about it at the end of my talk. I want to talk a little bit now about the steps. And Dick, thank you for what you did last night. You really brought the principles in those steps alive. I read a book. In the beginning, my sponsor would just let me read the big book. In fact, when he told me to start one page and read back, he said, I don't want you reading magazines, I don't want you watching TV, I don't want you watching and listening to radio. This is about sobriety, you just read this book. And after I'd read it long enough, he said, okay, here's the next one, and it was AA Comes of Age. And as I struggled through that book, and struggled through it, it was so dry. But eventually I had changed enough that it became just a wonderful history book of the first 20 years. And it was really within that book that I found God. That I absolutely saw the works of God active in those founders' lives. And really, time after time again, by the storytelling, they should have screwed this deal up. But at the last minute, power greater than themselves would swoop in and save the day. And so that was my first introduction to a God of my own understanding. And I didn't grow up with any religious training. I was one of those that stood in contempt of anybody that had a religious background. I thought you were men and women that were weak, and you were, trying to save the world, and, it repulsed me. And I was one of those people that would debate the existence of God or the non-existence of God, and I would come from a place of ignorance in my debate, and I'm sure it was self-aware to everybody in the conversation. So, just like the book says, my pathway to embracing a God of my own understanding was probably fairly easy. But I was so embarrassed. And I started out my search. I started out searching in meetings in the park that were, they would have some religious functioning, and I would go sit behind a palm tree within earshot of the minister and kind of listen and try to sort things out. And then eventually I graced the halls of some church and listened intently. And finally I found a way for me that really enlightened me and started me on a path. And that's called the 12 steps. And when I did that third step, what really struck out for me was that second sentence in that prayer, relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. The next, take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. For power in that way of life. I mean, that was my first introduction to knowing that self-centeredness, self-centered fear was the root of my problem. And that I was petitioning, as Dick said, it's really just a decision, but that within that prayer I was petitioning to have this character defect removed. And it was not for me. I was doing it for you. And I figured that out. And the joy that came into my heart. And then when I looked at the next couple of proposals, they were lying the same way, 4, 5, and 6. And in the 7, that prayer in 7, to become of maximum service to God and my fellows. Again, it was shaping me so that I could love and serve you. Similarly, in the 8th and 9th step, that's amending my past so that I can rid myself of these instincts that have been blocking me from you, that have been keeping me from being in love with you and serving you. And the beautiful 11th step. My life has changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. I kind of slowed down. I've always been able to sit quietly with myself and to turn off the noise. But I'm able to do it now, I think, at a deeper level. I discovered one more time that they added some words to some of the literature I read. And in the 12 and 12 and the 11th step, there's a wonderful paragraph in there. It talks about self-examination, prayer, and meditation. And that when they're interwoven, it creates an unshakable foundation for life. Now, I used to do my 10th step separately. But in the last year or so, I am doing this self-examination in the morning with paper and pen. And I'm examining things, and I'm taking my day, my 24 hours, to God in prayer, and then sitting quietly and listening for directions. And then doing what I think would fit His will for me today. And I must tell you, it is an astounding revelation for me. It's astounding. When I was 10 years sober, the first 5 years of my sobriety, I was ashamed to be alcoholic. Yeah, I think I mentioned yesterday in the meeting. It wasn't until I was about 5 years sober that I really became a member of AA. Although I'd been a GSR and a DCM by now, and I'm active, but I was only active with you. As soon as I walked out those doors, I was ashamed, and I didn't want anybody in my community to know that I was sober. Because they might judge me. To hell with what they had saw my actions in my drinking career. But I was so ashamed of my inability to control my drinking. And thank God that left me around about my 5th year of sobriety. And I started looking at life anew. Read this book right about that time. It was written by a member in Florida, and it's just titled 12. And it's a little short booklet, and it's his interpretation of the 12 steps in year 1, year 7, and year 14. And there are 3 distinct different articles on how those steps have worked in that person's life and how they've applied them. And that's been my experience. But at year 10, I found that my heretofore connection with God, and it came really quite sudden. It came sudden that morning that I woke up in bed and God was on my lips. The first thought of the day was of a creative intelligence. And I sat up in bed And for the next dozen years, it was like that way. Then one morning, it was gone. It left me. And for the next 4 or 5 years, I struggled. I searched every single day to refine that connection. And then I came to the understanding that it never left. I just changed. I moved. And there was nothing wrong with me moving and evolving. In fact, that was the nature of searching. The 11th step tells me, I don't find anything. I just search. And I continue to search and search. It continues to unfold for me. I believe that alcoholism in my life is probably a little bit hereditary. I probably learned too. Greatest thing I ever found in AA is that nobody can, tell anybody that you're a drunk or you're alcoholic. We all got to come to that realization ourselves. That's why we welcome everybody in here. Come on in, sit down, listen. You'll know if you belong or not. If not, go on your merry way. And I think in AA today we're finding that we've been so successful in raising the bottom that we have lots of visitors coming to AA that are scarcely potential alcoholics. And all of that's good. None of it's bad because we welcome people to come and be with us and to discover whether they have this illness or not. My mom, I believe, was alcoholic. My uncle was in AA. My dad was a heavy drinker. So I think I may have been predisposed to a lifestyle and maybe even a gene. I don't know. It really doesn't matter. But it leads me to start thinking about my children and their children, your children, the predisposition, and what am I doing about it? How am I ensuring that the hand of AA continues to be outstretched for the yet unborn alcoholic? Am I doing my part? Am I showing up every day? Am I giving into AA? And that's why when I evaluated my triangle, how is my triangle today? I think it's fairly good because I kind of devoted my life to AA. I learned early on that what I do is every day I come to and thank my God for another day, another opportunity, and I figure out first thing in the morning what meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous I'm going to today. And I plan my day around that meeting. Now, I'm kind of blessed if I go to 4 meetings a week. If that's how my day turns out, I'm really joyful. If there's more, that's great. But I still plan my day around that meeting. I've done that for many, many years. And it just seems my days always unfold well if I have a focus on AA. I talked a little bit about being the general manager, and I'm going to tell you 3 quick stories, and then I'll wind it up. But, what goes on in my home group is very important. We do 12-step work in our area, and it's the same thing, and everything we do is about carrying the message, reaching out. And, our responsibility pledge says anyone, anywhere who reaches out. And so, yeah, that's in Half Moon Bay, California, and it's in California, and in the States, and Canada, and Russia. It's around the world. I am responsible. Now, obviously, I can't be in Indonesia today, or I can't be over here, but there's things that I can do as a member of AA to ensure that the hand of AA is available. I can do my part, whether it's in prayer, whether it's in participating in my group, whether it's just elevating my awareness about the depth and breadth of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is in over 190 countries around the world today. There's a presence of it. And I don't know how many countries there are, maybe 210. I think the Olympic Committee says there's 212, maybe there's 215. Country today goes away tomorrow. The fact of the matter is there's 6 billion plus alcoholics on planet Earth. And, everybody's got their number, their percentage in their mind of how many of those people might have this illness. Whatever your percentage is, do a little multiplication. And you're going to come up with a very large number of people that may have this illness. And so I asked myself, what am I doing about it? Well, I've been very fortunate to be in a position for a while where I could do something about it. And one of the things we did on your behalf as your General Service Office is that in 2000, we had an international convention in Minnesota, and we had invited about half a dozen psychiatrists from Beijing to come and be with us at the international convention. We had been in contact with those psychiatrists for a little bit, and they had told us how there were many, many, many failures that happened at their Beijing Medical University, and that they had a program of working with alcoholics and their families, and they used psychiatric tools, and they used role modeling, they used therapy, and they did all kinds of stuff. And yet when they were done after a year and they would release them, they'd be drunk within a week. So they came to our convention, and several of the board members talked to them, and we visited them. I went to Beijing, met with a couple other trustees, went and we met with them, and they started instituting AA within their facilities. And magically, people started staying sober. They had the same year program, but they introduced the 12 steps, and they started staying sober. And it wasn't long afterwards that the first Chinese group got sober. I mean, there had been AA groups in Beijing for a long time, but you needed to have a passport to get in. And if you were a Chinese nationalist, you weren't welcome because you didn't have a passport. And the same story repeated. And this is one of the things that in our ability to reach out happens a lot through our friends that are non-alcoholic. Your physician. How many of you have disclosed to your physician that you're an AA member, or to your cleric, or your priest, or to your educator? How many of you disclose that? Well, the fact of the matter is, lots of AA meetings are started around the world by non-alcoholic professionals that are exposed to us and say, oh my God, this is a life-changing experience for people that suffer from alcoholism. AA's developed many friends over the years, and we have friends with the State Department. Lots of professionals come into the United States and into Canada doing research and looking at models of healthcare systems that are currently practiced. And one such group came from the Republic of Tuva in Siberia. And there was about 14 or 15 of them, and a couple of political guys from the Russian Duva. And they really besieged us after we met with them and told them what AA is and what it's not. And they wanted to visit because during the Russian USSR occupation, they had just decimated their entire civilization with free vodka and continued on. So we did a little 12-step call and went to Tuva, the city of Kazul, and found everything they said, and we met with the Prime Minister, and we met with the generals and the business leaders and the psychiatrists, and eventually a meeting was started in one of their psychiatric hospitals. And you plant those seeds, and all of a sudden another AA group is happening inside, and then it gets outside and it starts to mushroom. The last story that I think is really meaningful to me on how much work we have to do was in Kuwait. And in that part of the world, there's, alcohol and alcoholism. There's parts in the Middle East where you can be lashed if you even talk about consuming alcohol or drinking, or if you're even in recovery. And so it's fairly secretive, mostly in the expat communities. And we were invited to be there for a meeting, and it was really interesting. We'd have all the literature out on a table, And when we had a break, we had to cover it with a blanket in case somebody walked into the room, because the hotel we were in may get in a lot of trouble if they knew they were allowing an AA meeting to happen. Part of the program was that members in the community had invited their physicians to come. And so we delivered a presentation to them on what AA is, what it's not. And after we were done, we invited some of the professionals to respond. And so this is in like 2005, 2006, and here's some physicians that had never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now we have lots of literature, lots of pamphlets, in Farsi and in Arabic, and so the information's out there. But here's physicians, trained physicians, they've never heard about us. And they were so joyed to find out, oh my God, there's a solution, a tool that I can take into my clinic. I share these with you just to share with you that our work, my 12-step work, is never done. There's so many opportunities. Now, my biggest fear, always has been in sobriety, is that I may decide I can drink safely again and pick up that first drink. It's a day at a time. And my fear is that I won't ever be able to get back here. And I won't be able to kill myself. And I'm going to have to live that way for the remainder of my life. I happen to know a couple people like that. And they've been out there for 20 plus years. Died a couple of times, had the heart restarted, and they look very old and decrepit and just a shell of a person. I pray that doesn't happen to anybody in this room. I pray that you've made a decision today to stay sober and continue to do that for your tomorrows. I talked about maybe it might be a little hereditary. I have a couple of children. My other fear is that those kids may develop active alcoholism. Now, I know where I've been and what I've done, and I just can't even envision my kids selling their fanny on the street or being locked up or doing the things I did. I mean, as a parent, that would just absolutely break my heart. And I know I'm talking to a lot of parents, and I know you feel the exact same way. And the only thing that gives me solace, the only thing that really gives me strength is knowing that you're out there. Because you ought to know that I will go anywhere and do anything to help somebody if they want to stop drinking. Your children, their children. And I know you feel that way about my children if they have to go down that path. And that's the thing, the beauty about AA, is that together we can. I can't do it by myself. And that this fellowship is the most wonderful thing that's ever happened in my life. And I want to really thank all of you for my sobriety. God bless you and keep you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.